Hey guys, you're watching The Slate. This is your host, Josue Garcia.
I'm Nathan Else.
And joining us today is the spectacular Jesse Eastman.
Yeah.
Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, yes, welcome.
Yeah,
welcome.
of course. Awesome. So, to kick us off, you
Got
had
cool stories,
a disaster.
yeah.
Disaster of a story.
Before we got started, I was talking about this disastrous film that I tried to make twice. So the first time we shot it, we were cutting it, and it just was not working for a lot of different reasons, mainly lack of prep time, and that was like the biggest. I'm so into prep now.
Right.
Like
nice.
I'm like always annoying my actors and my crew members because I'll start prepping like 6 months before I shoot something now because I never want to experience that again because there's no reason why that many talented people should put out something that's just not good.
Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes you lose sight of things, but something that was just plain bad just should never have happened with that many great people. So definitely made me think about prep a lot more. And then we got a new cast, new crew, shot it all again, looked great. I thought it sounded great. And then I lost the footage to it. So we basically never got to release it. And it was one of my favorite scripts I've ever written, even to this day. It's gotten some acclaim here and there. I used it to get into a group called Get It Made X. You have to apply to get in.
Yeah.
I'm not any longer in that group. But the response to it was always really strong. And it was based off of my real life event. So the original title was 7 Hours, and then I switched it to Martha's Tears. And it's based on a real event that happened to me. So when I was in high school, I was dating my high school sweetheart for 2 years. And we had broken up a few times at the end of high school, but then decided to make it work.
Right.
So then I moved 7 hours away, which is not a great way to
work
on
right?
a rocky relationship. Pretty quickly realized it doesn't work, so I break up with her. And since we'd had already broken up 3 times that summer, I knew that that wasn't going to work. She was going to just try to work her way back in. I was going to take it because I did still love her, even though I didn't think it was going to work. So keep in mind, I was 18 years old.
Right, sure. Yeah.
People make mistakes when they're 18. They don't handle things with grace. I still struggle with that sometimes. I think we all do.
I was going to say, yeah.
I sent her a long text message breaking up with her, and I said, I'm going to turn my phone off because I want you to just think about my reasoning. I'm not saying we are never going to be together again. I would love to make this work, but obviously right now we're in very different places. So I'm not trying to silence this, but I think if you have the night to think about what I'm telling you, you might actually see it. But in the past, we've made the mistake of being afraid of being without each other and then just jumping back into it, even though it probably wasn't the best choice. Sure. So I turned my phone off. The next day, I turned my phone back on. I don't have a single message from her. And I'm like,
wow.
What is happening? This is not normal. Okay. I'm caring about my day. I'm hanging out. Coincidentally, we have women in our dorm, my roommate and I. We're not dating them or anything. We're not doing anything nefarious. We're just hanging out. They're friends that I made. And I'm starting to wonder why she hasn't reached out to me. Lo and behold, she drove 7 hours without saying anything and showed up at my dorm. She opens the door and sees me with women on my bed.
No.
Wow.
And then I have to break up with her again in person. So we go out to her car.
Oh, wow.
It's excruciating. There are a bunch of tears. We're crying. I break up with her again. She drove 7 hours just to get dumped twice.
That's brutal, man.
This isn't even the worst part. So I dump her again. She drives home. That's the end of it, right? It's, we're going to probably need some time before we're talking again, even as friends after that. But about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, I decide I'm dropping out of school. Okay. And I don't know anyone who will give me a ride. So who do I call? I ask her if she'll come give me a ride. So she drives 7 hours again, picks me up, all my shit's in her car, and then we drive back another 7 hours. So in the span of about 2 weeks, she drove 14 hours. No, 28 hours. She drove 28 hours in the span of 2 weeks to get dumped a second time and to come pick up her boyfriend, who she hasn't spoken to since I dumped her. And so the plot of the script is that 7 hour car ride back after I've dropped out of college. Oh, wow. So the main part is this 7-hour trip, and it was a very cathartic trip. You know, we weren't speaking for part of it. We obviously had a lot of things to work through. We had, we were arguing a bit, and then there were sweet moments where we kind of fell back into our old habits. There was it's in the script, there was a moment where she was getting really, really tired, but she wouldn't let me drive her car because at that time I wasn't that experienced of a driver. I got my license kind of late. So she didn't trust me to drive her car. So she basically was like, you need to read to me in order to keep me awake. So there was like an hour I was just like reading to her while she drove, and it was a very sweet moment for us. So that's all in the script, and then there are flashbacks to the time when she came up and I broke up with her. So the main story was us on this 7-hour car trip. And then I had to exaggerate some things for effect in the script, which this is not how it was in real life. In the script, the lead character hadn't even told his family he dropped out yet. And when the ex-girlfriend finds out, she makes him get out of the car and call his mom in the middle of the highway that he's on his way home. I added little things that were not exactly accurate, just because it's a movie. But then there are these flashbacks to when the actual breakup happened. And I loved the script. I still am really proud of the script. Shot it twice, and no one will ever see it.
Dude, I'm man.
But it's a crazy story.
I'm firmly in the camp of cheerleading for a third attempt.
See, here's the thing. If anyone wants to make this, I have tons of scripts, including this one. They can have at it, honestly. If anyone listening to this wants this, I'm sure that there will be a time where I can give my social media info.
Absolutely.
So reach out if you think this is a good story. You can have it.
All right.
But it's one of those things where, like I said, you got to listen to the universe. Something about me and the project. It's not meant to be, but if someone else hears this and thinks, "Hey, man, let me get a crack at it," then by all means, story, first come, first served.
Nice. There you go. There you go. Wow. Yeah, that is a hell of a story.
Wow, that's great. That threw me off a little bit. I'm going to be honest.
I hope everyone knows, by the way, that she and I are fine. We're not friends necessarily. We don't regularly communicate, but she's got a family. She's got children of her own. I met who is now my wife, about 6 months after this happened.
Okay.
All
right.
So it all worked out. Yeah, we all worked out. We have each other on Facebook. She'll interact with with my posts and stuff, but we're not close or anything. But it seems like we all got where we were intended to go. So
okay.
For anyone that's thinking,
right.
I wonder how that ended up.
Right. And you said you retitled the story Martha's Tears?
Yeah, it was originally called 7 Hours. Okay. The characters, I won't say her name in real life.
Sure.
But I used the same, and I do this a lot in other work. I use the same character first letter as the person.
Right. Oh.
Especially when I'm working with a large cast.
Yeah.
Just so that I don't constantly fumble over, like, am I calling you your real name or your character name? Sometimes, like in Nervous Records, most of the characters are just named what the actors are named. So, like, Tim Mantle is the lead of Nervous Records, the web series. His character's name is Tim, because I'm lazy.
Yeah, no, it works.
So, the person in real life, her name starts with M, so Martha is the placeholder. And I can't remember what I called the character that's my surrogate, but the name started with J. I think it was like Josh or something.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Gotcha.
Cool.
And was that your first movie?
No, that would have been the first attempt would have been like my fifth, maybe fourth or fifth.
Wow. Okay.
And then we attempted it about a year later, and at that point, I think I had made another one or two. Sure. So. Kind of right there in the middle. I want to say I'd made like approximately 9 things by now.
Sure. All right.
What was your first?
My first film was a 48-hour challenge.
Oh, nice.
Was that the one that Bill Hedges plays?
No, that was recent. That just happened. That was
okay.
That was just this last September. That was my third time doing the 48-hour challenge. So, without going too into detail, I started out as an actor. I studied theater in college when I went to college for the brief time. And I did a lot of community theater in high school and then post-high school, post-dropout. But I always was a fan of film, but I just didn't even really think that there was film happening around here.
Sure, yeah.
So I thought I would just try to make it as a theater actor, and then maybe film would come along at some point. But one of my best friends, he was working on a movie with somebody that he had, and I auditioned for that, and I ended up getting in it. So I acted in a movie, and then pretty much right after that, I got a role in another movie. Both of them were features, and I don't know, something about those two experiences tied together I found myself a lot more interested in what was happening behind the camera. I remember during the first one, there were times where they were setting up and I was prodding around, asking questions, looking at the monitor, and they're like, "You're in this scene. Can you go over there so that we can start shooting?" Yeah. I'm like, yeah. So I would go and I would do what I need to do, and then as soon as I was done, I would go and I would ask if I can watch it, and
That's awesome.
I found myself so much more interested in that, and I had already grown a little bit cold to the theater acting. I have extremely bad stage fright, and I always have.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So even though I found it really fulfilling, it was always like every play that I was in took a huge toll on me.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel that as much with film acting. You know, I still get a little bit nervous, but because you can just cut, roll it again, the stakes are lower and it gives you more freedom.
Oh, yeah.
But the whole dichotomy of like needing to perform at a high level every time, there are no second chances. The live audience needs to have a good show.
Yeah.
It just always made me so nervous. I was always afraid I was going to forget my lines, and sometimes being nervous made me forget my lines, which is extremely terrifying. If you've ever forgotten lines in front of an audience, I mean, nothing is worse. So I was already kind of falling out of love with theater acting in general, and then this new bright and shiny thing came along. So basically, after those first 2 acting experiences, I decided I wanted to make my own movies. So I started with the 48-hour challenge in 2018, which would have been fall of 2018. So
That's an ambitious start.
4.5 years ago. Well, it didn't seem ambitious to me because the stakes are relatively low. Everyone is under the same duress, right? You have 48 hours to write, produce, film this thing. Edit. And everyone has the same rules, and it's kind of a good spot for beginners because you don't have to do all this prep. I didn't really know how to do prep. You know, I had never written anything before that as a script. I've written some plays and things. But you don't really have to worry about all that because whatever you get done in that 48 hours, that's it, and then you can be done with it. So it seemed like the most ideal way to kind of do a test drive.
Nice, yeah, okay. That makes
Because
sense.
it only took 48 hours of my time. I didn't have to do anything else. So that was kind of my little dipping my toes in experience, trying to figure out if this was really something I wanted to do. And I just absolutely loved it. So after that, I got to work on my first real short, which came out. We shot it in March of 2019, so about 4 years ago. And then it came out that fall. So, and
What film is that?
That's called The Hero. It's available on my YouTube, Eastman
cool.
Features. You know, there are a lot of things about it that I'm proud of, but it's like most people's first film. You know, you don't have it all there quite yet. The biggest thing was I wanted it to have this timeless look, so we shot on, I forget what it's called, but it was like an early DSLR camera. It was like a Canon XD1 or something. It was almost like a camcorder version of a camera.
Oh, wow.
But it gave this like vintage look that I really liked. But I wasn't, I didn't fully know what I wanted from it. And so when I was trying to explain that to my team, everybody was going to have a slightly different interpretation because not only did I not fully know what I wanted, but I also couldn't articulate it that well. I didn't have the film language. So it's like everyone's first movie. I'm happy with it, but it's not something that I generally, you know, look back at and think, man, that was my my big break. And I've pretty much worked steadily since. You know, COVID happened, and I wrote dozens of scripts during COVID. I wrote so I had the idea for my silent film that's playing tonight at the Omaha Film Festival before I even knew I wanted to make it a film. It was originally a one-act play. When I was like 18. But by the time I started making film, I had it in the back of my mind that I would eventually want to make that into a short film. So when COVID hit, that was the first script I wrote. I wrote it in April of 2020. I had nothing, you know, no one was filming, so I wrote that. I wrote Martha's Tears, the one I was just talking about. I wrote a couple other shorts, tons and tons of stuff just in like a 6-month span. I wrote my first feature in the winter of the first year of COVID. So that was a big writing year for me. For about 18 months, it was writing because there was no filming happening. And even the silent film shoot had been pushed back twice. It was supposed to be November of 2020. COVID was still pretty bad at that time. We pushed it to spring of 2021. Then we pushed it back to November of 2021, and then we pushed it back a final time to January of 2022.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
So COVID really screwed that up, but honestly, I think the film is only as good as it is because I had to hold on to it for so long.
Yeah.
I kept making small tweaks to the script. We went through a few different, when I first came up with the idea, I knew I wanted Patrick Lambrecht, who ended up being the lead character. I wanted him in that lead role. But during a long time of COVID, because he's immunocompromised, he's diabetic, it wasn't looking like it was going to work if I wanted to either shoot it during that time. I basically had to choose between waiting for a long time for him till he was comfortable or recasting it if I wanted to shoot it sooner. So I had another guy who was attached for a long time. For one reason or another, that didn't work out. So then I circled back, and Patrick was then in a spot where he felt a little bit better and was willing to come do it. So we kind of went original actor, second actor, back to original actor.
Right.
I had to recast a couple other roles, which anybody who's ever made a film can tell you is pretty much the norm. I don't think I've ever worked on a project where I didn't have to recast at least one role because an actor drops out or various things happen. But I've never had to not recast someone, I think.
Okay. All right.
So I was pretty used to it by that point. And,
for sure.
Minus this year and a half point during COVID, I wasn't actually shooting anything, but then I had lined up all these scripts for when people felt ready to start filming again.
Okay.
So coming out at the end, once the vaccine was out, then I started shooting all these things that I had written before.
Oh, nice, yeah. And that's where the film that's showing tonight, that's where For the Love of Dick, it fell in that writing period there.
Yep, I wrote it, like I said, I wrote it right at the beginning of COVID when the world started shutting down and I had to still work out in public.
Okay.
I didn't have a job that I was able to do from home.
Okay.
My wife's a teacher, so they went remote.
Right.
But I was still working during that first 6 months of COVID. I was working in retirement homes. I worked with old people. People with Alzheimer's was like kind of my specialty. So I was in and out of extremely dangerous environments. So my nerves were always shot. I was always worried about having COVID and being sick. And the only thing I could do was write.
Right, sure.
To calm myself down.
Where does Nervous Records fit in all of this writing?
That came later. So
Okay.
Nervous Records started out as a 48-hour challenge. That was my second 48-hour challenge.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So that was 1 year before we hooked up.
Yep.
So what was that? Fall of 2021. Fall of 2021, I decided to do the 48-hour challenge again for the first time in 4 years. That's how I got my start. So I partnered up with Chance Guida, who was my co-creator on the series, and then another guy, Adam Gutierrez, who's not as involved with the series, but he's a great filmmaker in Lincoln as well. And we did this 48-hour challenge, which turned into Nervous Records. It was supposed to be 5 minutes. We had a 15-minute version, so we had to try to cut.
Okay.
We filmed too much stuff.
Yeah.
I wrote 6 pages. I don't know why I thought 6 pages would somehow turn into under 5 minutes. My scripts have always been, the page count has never matched.
Okay.
So like For the Love of Dick, our rough cut of that was 36 minutes, and then obviously the version that's playing tonight had to be trimmed down to 25.
Okay.
It's 24 minutes and 50 seconds.
All right.
That's a 12-page script.
Wow.
I made a movie called Today and Yesterday.
All right.
We shot it about 6 months before COVID, and that's one of the movies I'm the proudest of to this day. That script was 35 pages. The movie's 48 minutes. So my scripts have always been, they play long.
Yeah.
So I wrote 6 pages, and we filmed it all, and it ended up being 14 and a half minutes, and we had to find a way to make it 5 minutes for the challenge.
Yeah.
So the version that we presented at the show, it had its moments, but overall it just didn't work because of how long it was trying to fit into that short package. So there were some moments that people really liked. It got a good reception, but narratively it was just kind of wonky. It felt like there was a lot missing because there was a lot missing.
Yeah.
So a couple months later we released the full version.
All right.
And while we were shooting it, a few of the key cast members had kind of in their own different ways, kind of mentioned that they were really into this little universe we created. The premise, for people who don't know, is it's a dying record company, and two people who work there are falling in love with each other. So not only are they dealing with the emotions of falling in love, but their jobs could be going away at any moment.
Right. Yeah.
And we had this location, Studio B, which is no longer there. That location is still on the market.
Really?
It's over there off of 48th and Hamilton. It's for sale. The whole building is. But we had some connections, and the guy, who owns the whole place, he was kind of in this half in, half out retirement for years. He hasn't been working much. Right. He's been kind of taking it easy and looking to retire, and he can't officially retire until he sells the place. He's got to pay the rent there, so in order to afford the rent, he's got to work a little bit.
Is that the Luthier, the Hargis guitar violin place? Or is this in Lincoln?
This is in Omaha. I don't know anything about that, but he did, the guy, I can't even think of his name, Clint. His last name is eluding me, because we were mainly contacting through people who rented an office there.
Okay.
And they were talking to him on our behalf, so it was kind of a middleman situation.
Right.
He seemed great in all the conversations we did have over the phone. But he used to produce music for Mannheim Steamroller.
Yeah, okay.
And that's how he kind of got his claim to fame.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had access to this location, and it had these gold records on the walls and everything, and that's how we came up with the idea. We had to shoot there, and Chance was walking around. He saw the gold records, and he was like, hey, we should find a way to use these somehow.
Sure, absolutely.
So one thing led to another, and we came up with the story. But people were telling me while we were filming, like, hey, this is such a fun idea. I would totally be down for some kind of expanded version. It was actually Jenna Briggs who plays the character of Jenna.
Okay.
Again, lazy.
Sure.
She thought it might make a feature. She came up to me on the second day of shooting, the second morning, and was like, have you ever thought about making this into a feature? This is so fun. And I was like, well, I don't know about a feature, but I do really want to make a web series. I had tried to make a web series during COVID. I wrote the whole thing. I co-wrote it with Jean-Paul Zur, who he was in the Martha's Tears 1.0, the one that we had to reshoot.
All right.
He also plays the Frankenstein's monster character in my silent film that plays tonight.
Nice. Okay.
So we co-wrote this thing together.
Okay.
And we had a huge cast. I mean, it was too ambitious. It was 20 characters.
Oh,
it was about a traveling theater troupe.
Wow.
Who basically they were originally going to do this little tour like off Broadway in New York, but their budget got slashed, so they decided to take it through a tour of the Midwest to kind of gauge interest.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's the director, one of the financiers, a huge group of actors, some understudies, some crew members, and the first episode takes place all on a bus.
All right, sure, yeah.
And the funny thing is the show is not going well, so everybody's kind of turning on each other.
Oh, wow.
Because they're looking for someone to blame for like why the reception to the show, because it's a New Yorker kind of artsy, pretentious thing.
Okay, yeah, sure.
They were set up to fail because they're touring through the Midwest with this thing that's really doesn't fit the Midwestern sensibility. So everyone is doubting themselves and doubting each other, and everyone's kind of turning on each other. So the first episode takes place on a bus. The two middle episodes take place. The bus breaks down. This is like about a couple weeks into the future from the first episode. So they all have to camp out overnight while they wait for a tow truck. Okay. So the second episode and the third episode all happen in real time while they're all forced to kind of camp out together on the side of the road. And then the final episode is in the green room right before their final performance. And I really loved this idea, and our script was great. We loved it. We had a huge cast, but it was in the middle of COVID, and we were doing Zoom read-throughs, and we were making tweaks to the script, and we kept getting back together, and I was just starting to do pre-production. I was looking for locations, and one thing led to another, and it's one of those things. It had been over a year since we wrote it, and all we'd been doing is meeting over Zoom. I think a lot of people just kind of fell out of interest with it. It had just drug on too long. So people just started dropping like flies from it, and I was trying to recast people, and I was trying to make it work, but at a certain point, I just couldn't patch up all the holes, and we had to just blow the thing up. But I was really heartbroken by that process. It's probably that and the Martha's Tears fiasco have been the two biggest heartbreaks for me. And I really wanted to make a series after that. If something good came along that would work, I had told myself, like, you have to still make some kind of series, even if it's not that one. So fast forward, we're shooting the Nervous Records 48-hour challenge. Jenna tells me, like, hey, this could be a great feature. And then I immediately think, many of these people involved in this were in the the other web series.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Jenna was in it. A couple other people were in it.
Okay.
So I was like, I could totally make this into a series. So a couple months later, in February of last year, I wrote all 8 episodes. I'm a very fast writer.
Yeah.
I think anybody who works with me could vouch. Doesn't necessarily mean anything, but once I'm ready to write something, because all of my work tends to be so dialogue driven, I just write it really quick. So what I would do is I had an outline for the whole series, and I just had bullet points for each episode of things I wanted to happen in the episode. And I would sit down and I would write a full episode before I finished. So I would sit down, it would take me 90 minutes to 2 hours. I would have a 15-page episode. Wow. And then I might wait a few days, and then I'd sit down and write episode 2. So it only took me about 2 to 3 hours max on each episode of the rough drafts. I started sending them out. We got some notes. We did a read-through. And then I made second drafts of them all. So I want to say April of last year, about a year ago, is when it became really serious.
Right.
And I knew I had the location. And I knew I had to shoot before the location was going to go up on the market, because even though it hasn't been sold yet and we shot it 5 months ago, there was no way of knowing if it was going to immediately get snatched up. So we had a very tight timeline for when we were going to have access to the place. So that kind of informed our shooting schedule and, when we had to start shooting. So prep was all of, let's say, April, May, June, July, August, September of 2022. Yeah, so it was post-COVID, post-vaccine, is when the whole thing started. It started out as a 48-hour challenge, and then it turned into the web series. We shot that for 15 days, weekends only. So because I work in Lincoln and I work during the week, so our first weekend was September 10th and 11th. And then we just shot every weekend minus the weekend of that we did our 48-hour challenge. Yeah. That was during our off weekend.
All right. Wow.
So I didn't get any rest because I also work Monday through Friday in Lincoln.
All right.
So the one weekend we took off to give everybody a break was the weekend we did the
back
48-hour
in. Nice.
So we finished shooting that in November.
Okay.
And then we've been editing it. Chance, my co-creator, he's the cinematographer and the editor on this. Okay. We kind of edited it together though. He was already cutting because we shot it mainly in order. We had all of episode 1, 2, and 3 shot by the end. Oh, okay. So the last couple weekends we were mainly working on some episode 4 stuff, some episode 6 stuff, and then the finale, based on just shooting schedules and stuff. So we had a rough cut of the pilot episode the weekend that we shot our last footage. And then since November, it's just been cranking that out. And we have 7 episodes finished. Actually tonight we're going to be editing after the film festival. We're going to try to wrap up our rough cut of the finale. So
busy night, man. And did you have a title for back to the traveling theater group? Did you have a title for that?
Yeah, that was called Doldrums Loves Company.
Okay, nice.
Because it's about a company.
Right.
And then, when you're in the doldrums, when you're feeling like shit, you want to make other people feel like shit.
Yeah, sure.
So,
yeah. Has a very, I'm older, but the Sex Pistols traveling down the Midwest and the South kind of vibe to it. Just,
I love a good, Martha's Tears, a.k.a. 7 Hours, also a travel piece.
Yeah.
I have conceived of this documentary that I may or may not ever get to just because I do care a lot more about narrative.
Sure.
But I have this documentary idea that's part documentary, but it's part road film too.
Oh, cool.
Not to go into too much specifics, but it's following long haul truck drivers, and I want to follow one person who's just started doing it, one person who's been doing it for 10 to 15 years, and then a recent retiree. Because one, we spend so much time sharing the road with these long haul truck drivers, and they've got to have their own whole set of unwritten rules, and there's got to be so many interesting things that we just don't know about. And I find those fascinating, but also the dichotomy of one, you know you're providing well for your family. You make really good money doing this, but you have to spend the majority of your life alone.
Yeah.
And you don't get to actually be there with your family that often.
Right,
Even though you know that they're safe and comfortable, you barely get to see them.
Right.
So looking at people at different points in their lives, they can attest to the toll that it's taken to spend that much time, away from their family.
Oh, that's good.
So it would be interviews, but then I would actually be in the trucks, getting, random footage, candids, things like that. So it would blend the road film with the documentary.
Oh, I love that.
And I'd love to make it, but it just... the schedule fills up fast.
Yeah,
I've got my next 5 projects planned
Oh,
already.
do you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, at least.
Wow.
I'd have to look at my notebook, but I want to say at least 5.
And does that include projects like after you move out?
Yeah, so to address the move, I scheduled a lot of stuff for the next few months. I have a shoot, the one that Timothy Mantle's directing. We're shooting at the end of March. I have another silent project I'm shooting in April.
Okay.
I'm also acting in that with Christian. He's my co-star.
Sure, nice. Yeah.
And that one's really easy. It's only one day, maybe 2, and it's 6 episodes, and they're all meant to be like 2 minutes long.
Oh, nice.
Because it's meant to play on TikTok.
Oh, nice.
So that one will be. That one is a lot more like Laurel and Hardy, Buster Keaton.
Yeah, nice.
It's about 2 guys who are working on a farm property.
Okay.
I play the kind of dumber one.
Okay.
Christian's playing the more serious one, and we fall in love with the guy who we're working with's daughter. She's roaming around. We both are trying to court her, so we're getting in each other's way.
Sure.
We're trying to pull pranks on each other.
Yeah, I love it.
So it's really slapsticky. There's bits where people get hurt. There's a lake on the property that we're shooting at, and in one of the scenes, I'm trying to go after him, and he ducks, and I jump right into the water.
Nice. Yeah.
Very fun, lighthearted. So we're shooting that in April, and then the project with Paul Glenn that I mentioned, we're shooting that in the middle of May. There's a bunch of stuff that I'm not directly involved with, stuff that I've written. I've been kind of working my way more into writing and producing because I love directing, but I can only mentally handle 1 or 2 projects a year as a director. It takes a different level of care, and I'm so obsessed with every detail that I just can't. I don't have the physical bandwidth to do that. So I've been writing scripts for other people, and I've written 4 scripts. It's called like the Seasons quadrilogy.
Oh, nice.
And each one takes place during a different season, and they're all anthologies, but they're related in that they're all about relationships. So
nice. Okay.
the winter one is about two divorcees who are on their second date, and the guy tells the girl that he's on a second date with, like, hey, I know we never like made any agreements or anything, but I do feel like I should tell you, like, sometime between when we went on our first date and now, I went and visited my ex-wife and we ended up sleeping together, but like that's it.
Right.
And so like she gets kind of mad, but then she also realizes, like, hey, like, people mess up and we're not official or anything. So it's just like a little conflict there.
Yeah.
But then they end up making it work because they like each other. And the second one is about a couple who's been together for a long time. Okay. They spend about 3 months broken up. Okay. And while they're broken up, she gets pregnant by someone else.
Oh, wow.
And so the screenplay starts right after she's told him. Wow. And it's his immediate reaction to... he has to decide if he wants to stay with her. He has to decide what they want to do with the baby. Right. They have to decide that together. Right. He's also still figuring out, like, I've been with you for 10 years. We're broken up for 3 months, and now you're pregnant with someone else's child.
Stakes are instantly.
They're all 7 pages. So they're all going to be about 10, 12 minutes long.
Gotcha.
Right. And so when they're all together, they're going to be an hour long.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And so we were supposed to shoot one in December, but it got pushed back. So at the end of April, I believe. No, it was the end of March. It's the end of April. April 30th and May 1st are the shoots of the spring one, which is the pregnancy one. Mm-hmm. And then we've got another one in June that's That's our summer one.
Okay.
So I'll be gone when they shoot the fall one and when they
Right.
circle back and eventually reshoot the winter one.
Okay.
But I don't have to be there because my job is already done.
Right. I was going to ask, do you shoot or who does the DP work on?
I never shoot any of my own stuff.
Right.
That would be a terrible choice.
Okay.
Why is that?
I just don't have the visual. I'm getting a lot better at it, especially when it comes to lenses and angles. I might have a little bit more insights, but
Right.
I've just never been the biggest visual person.
Right,
I
yeah.
appreciate visual films. I can describe what I like about them, but
Right.
cameras are confusing
Yes.
to me.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of buttons, and there's
Yeah.
too many options.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like writing, directing, shooting, editing your own stuff is just a little bit too much work for any one person.
Oh, for sure.
I think you should always have at least one other person in a key position because you need someone to tell you like, hey, that doesn't look good, or hey, that's not working.
Right.
I think it's always good to have a sounding board. So
Absolutely.
since I take a lot more pride in my writing and directing, I've always had a director of photography on every project I've done. And then I've worked with basically the same 3 editors
Okay.
over and over again, and I like being really involved in the edit. I'll give very, very detailed notes at times, but other times I kind of like seeing what other people do when they can just run free. So
I love that too.
yeah, the way I love to work is after we shoot something, I'll comb over the footage and I'll make general observations about things I'm looking for in the final, and then I'll get everything to the editor and they will make a rough cut without me, and then they'll bring me the rough cut, and then from that point on, we'll whittle it down together. And that gives them the freedom to make some of those original choices that kind of establish the tone of the edit. And then once I come in, then I can say like, hey, you know, I remember making a note about this one take that I really loved. I noticed that you didn't use that take. Could you just put it in for me? That way I can see the difference, and if we can see if we like it better. Things like that. Cutting things down. You know, trying to get them shorter. You know, the rough cut of For the Love of Dick was, like I said, it was like 36 minutes. We had a really good cut that I was proud of that was about 29 minutes.
Okay.
And if not for submitting to the Omaha Film Festival, I probably would have had that be the final version.
Right.
But forcing myself to get it under 25 minutes, I think ultimately made the movie better.
Okay. Cool.
I didn't feel like I had to sacrifice anything. I think any more than I did cut, and we get into that territory of like, now we're missing things, but it really made me look at stuff that we shot that I was really in love with and just say like, it's not necessary. I love it, but it's not necessary. And like, I love silent films. I really want For the Love of Dick and my TikTok project to kind of represent them and say like, hey, you know, this is a medium that was the standard for 30 years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a lot of the greatest films ever made are from that era still. So it forces you to tell a concise story when you take out dialogue. You know, as much as I love my dialogue and my writing and my characters, there's something just like innately powerful about how can you convey as much with as little as possible. So I would love to see other people making silent films as well. I love them, and I think that they're in a lot of cases just as valuable as like the modern style of filmmaking. So
in fact, I think when the first soundy film came out, the Academy Awards didn't have an award for sound. You know, they were still all lined up for silent. Did you happen to catch Hundreds of Beavers at the festival?
I did catch Hundreds of Beavers.
How'd you feel about it?
I loved it. You guys can put this in the final. You don't have to.
Okay.
I thought it was a little longer than it needed to be.
Okay.
I think, even though I loved all of it, I was laughing throughout. I think there was a very clear... Were you guys there for the full thing?
We saw it for... I was there for bits and pieces, and from what I like...
So it's 2 hours long.
Oh, I didn't realize it was 2 hours.
2 hours.
I thought it was 90 minutes.
No, I did too. It was 2 hours long.
Whoa.
Wow.
And it was genius what they did. I absolutely adore it. It's right up my alley. The guy described it as Looney Tunes. I think it was more like live in action, Itchy and Scratchy.
Oh, sure.
Gotcha.
It also reminded me a lot of Spy vs. Spy.
Yes.
Spy vs.
The beavers and the human constantly.
Mad magazines. Yeah, absolutely.
So I love those Spy vs. Spy cartoons. They used to use them on, was it Mountain Dew commercials?
It must something.
There were
I remember
little
they licensed them for
commercials
something.
where,
Yeah.
But I used to love those things.
I'm old enough that Mad Magazine was coming off the press when I was a kid.
And I love
so,
Mad
yeah,
Magazine
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
As much as I love silent films, it does. You reach a point if you pass 90 minutes
Yes.
where it's just not necessarily
Yes.
a medium for that kind of long form storytelling.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
even though I love our rough cut of the silent film I made, at 36 minutes it was feeling tiresome. I was like, I love what we did with this, but this is just way too slow and without the dialogue.
Yeah.
And we edited the whole thing before we did the music.
Oh, okay.
I worked
sure.
hand in hand with our composer.
Okay.
Once we had our final picture lock, and we composed the music to that, so he didn't have to make any extra music that wasn't going to be in it.
Yeah.
And so we were editing this all without music, so it allowed us to be extra critical.
Yeah.
Because watching a silent film without music is terrible.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely terrible.
I can imagine.
So this 36-minute silent film with dead silence was just like
grueling.
yeah. If I didn't like it without the music, then I knew we had a problem.
Yeah.
So
That's good though, man. That's
yeah.
good. Yeah, because we had Mike Cheslick, who's the director and writer of Hundreds of Beavers. We had him on an episode, and I love that genre. Again, I'm old enough that I've seen tons of that stuff. Love it. But I was wondering, like, I'd seen some of his previous work, so I had complete faith in him. But that question kept popping up in my mind, like, does the audience have the energy and the endurance? Because you have to craft that for, and even at 90 minutes, I was thinking it was just 90 minutes. For 90 minutes, you really can't let them fall off for too long.
Yeah.
Right? So if there's, a 12, 15-minute period in there where they start to get comfortable and sleepy.
Yeah, and that's not even a knock on the silent thing, because live action movies can do that too.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
I think regular dialogue movies are easier to sit through when they're longer, but there are some, I'll watch a movie at home. It's, let's say, 100 minutes long, and I'm 80 minutes in, and I'm just like, feels like it should be over, and I won't even finish it.
I'll just make up the rest in my head. Or I'll just end it here.
Or just
I'm
read
good
the
with that.
Wikipedia to see how it ends.
There you go. Yeah,
But I feel like I'm done with this
Yeah.
before it's actually over.
Yeah.
That's one of the things about streaming. Not to go on a tangent, but like when
No.
you don't have the stakes of like I made a whole night out of this,
Yep.
you could just turn shit off and go about your day.
Absolutely, man.
I'm particularly bad with TV shows. I will love a TV show. I'll watch 4 episodes and I'll be totally hooked.
Yeah.
And then if I go like a week, say I get really busy and a week goes by and I haven't watched it, I'm never going back.
Yeah, you lost
It doesn't matter how good it was.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I will tell people like that show was like a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
But I got busy with other stuff and I cannot get back into it.
Yeah, I have the same thing.
Yeah, there's also that like mental energy to get back into
Exactly,
that world
and that's
really pick up.
That's what I'm nervous about in both cases. One, Nervous Records, it's an 8-episode series.
Yeah.
All the episodes are 20 to 26 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
We shot it for $3,000, the whole thing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, like, even though it looks great for its budget, it is a low-budget indie web series.
Sure.
So, how many people are going to finish that? And it has nothing to do with quality. Most people just aren't going to finish an 8-episode series anymore.
Right. Yeah.
That's just, there's too much content available.
Yeah.
So that's one thing while you're making it. Like, I'm making this for the few people who find something in it and want to stick it through. I can't be thinking about what if this catches fire and becomes viral? What if people love it? That's a nice thought, but like you can't be making something that long for that. You have to think, if 10 people make it through this that aren't directly involved with it, if they make it through it, it still needs to be as good on the end as it is at the beginning.
Right,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So that's something I'm nervous about. And then also with my silent film, it's not exactly like Hundreds of Beavers. It has some slapsticky moments in it.
Okay.
It was super influenced by Buster Keaton. He's like my all-time favorite.
He's good. He's good.
But the thing about Buster Keaton is all of his movies have this sad undertone. His character always has a sad look on his face.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just love the tone that he captures, which is both like funny, but also there's this apathy.
Yeah.
His character is so apathetic all the time.
That's a
And
great way
it
to
makes
describe
everything
it.
funnier.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it does. It
So
does.
I tried to incorporate as much of that as I can, but it's more so than just being kind of silent film style. It's also an adaptation of Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein, and it's a love story, and there's like a lot of science happening. We also shot that at Bill Hedges' studio. So it's not like every 30 seconds there's going to be a funny sight gag or a joke.
Right, yeah,
So this one is one that you really have to invest in. And I've never seen anyone watch it live. You know, I've sent the link to people, and I've gotten positive feedback. You know, you have to take that with a grain of salt. It's nice, but also, you know, your friends are generally not going to say, like, hey, I thought that it was cool what you were doing, but also it's a silent film. Like my brother, for instance, he doesn't have to do all that shit that other filmmakers do. So he told me, he was like, I watched 10 minutes of it. It would look cool, but I'm not watching a 25-minute silent film. I'm sorry.
Right, sure.
It is what it is. And that's how the general public is going to feel, right? So tonight is my first time seeing an audience see it. So it's not, like I said, it's not like Hundreds of Beavers where it's constantly, there's joke, funny, physicality. It's got a little bit of that, but it really is. It's 25 minutes of, you know, a real full story is happening. You know, it's about a guy who's lonely and sad, and he keeps trying to find things to make his life more meaningful, and he can't seem to get there. And you know, there's a lot more going on emotionally, I would say. And so, are people going to be able to hang for 25 minutes without the dialogue? I hope so, but I really honestly don't know.
So I'm excited. I hope we get that. That's one in particular that I really, if I can time it right, I'm going to sit through the whole thing.
You're watching the season 1 finale of The Slate. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, like and subscribe for parts 2 and 3 as we wrap up our podcast with more engaging behind the scenes stories, references, and future projects.